What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the Martian MMA podcast. I am your host, and my name is John, and this week we are back with episode 95, where we will be analyzing and predicting the UFC on ESPN Plus card going down this Saturday, March 14th, 2020, headlined by Kevin Lee versus Charles Oliveira. This fight card will take place in Brasilia, Brazil, featuring 12 fights airing entirely on ESPN Plus, with the first 6 prelim fights starting at 5 p.m. Eastern Time in the main card, with 6 fights starting at 8 p.m. Eastern Time. So this card is going forward as planned, even though we had some fears over the coronavirus canceling it. I believe the event will take place with no fans in the arena, and that actually might affect these fights a little bit. Brazil is very common to get some hometown decisions for Brazilians, and that might not be a factor in some of these fights now. So I think that from top to bottom, the card is really good. I think the main card and the main event is great fights, and I'm really excited to break down these fights. So we're going to start things off with the first fight of the evening in the women's bantamweight division, where we have Veronica Macedo, who is 6-3-1, taking on Maia-Burns, who is 1-0. The opening betting line for this one was Macedo, the favorite, at -160 Malecki plus 130. Right now we are seeing Macedo -170, Malecki plus 150. So I'd say that this is a bit wide, this opening betting line, or where the opening line was set was okay. Where it's at now, I think is still a bit wide. I'll just come out and say one thing off the bat is I think this fight is extremely low level as you can get in the UFC, as evident by the fact that Malecki it has one pro fight. So I honestly think it's kind of embarrassing this fight is taking place in the UFC, but regardless, we got Malecki, who is moving down to 135, and Macedo, who is moving up to 120 or 35. She spent a lot of her career at 25 and has struggled with the size at 35 before, got knocked out by Ashley Evans-Smith at 135 pounds. And, Malecki's going to have a massive size advantage. I'm talking like 6 inches of reach, maybe even more than that. I'm talking maybe 6 or 8 inches of height and reach on Macedo here. I don't really think she knows how to use it that well. She's just so unskilled. She just throws straight punches and a super sloppy boxing technique. Her last fight, she was getting outstruck by Duda Santana, got taken down a few times, was able to just end up on top of a really lucky grappling scramble in round 2 and get an opportunistic rear naked choke. That was one of the most lucky wins I've ever seen in the UFC, being Malecki's last fight. So I think that Macedo has the better technique all around. Macedo's got that taekwondo background. She's got some decent kicks, good boxing. It's going to be hard for her to land strikes, though, because the size difference is so big. And on the ground, I think Macedo is way better. She has pulled off a nice submission in her last fight against Viana. And I think that we will see Macedo probably outgrapple Malecki, maybe even get on her back, look for a submission. But the size difference in this fight, and the fact that Macedo's moving up, Malecki's moving down, all signs point to Malecki having a massive size advantage. That's going to make the fight hard to win for Macedo. And at the current odds, I think that there is value on Malecki. I won't be betting it, though. I think that if you bet either side of this fight, you're going to feel like you need a shower after watching it, because it's likely going to be really, really sloppy. So the pick is going to be Macedo by decision, but it's a pass in both ends of the betting window. The next fight takes place in the flyweight division. We have Bruno Silva, who is 10-4-2, taking on Silva-Dvorak, who is 17-3. The opening betting line for this one was Silva, the -145 favorite, to Dvorak plus 115. Right now the line is Silva -115, Dvorak -105. So much more action coming in on the dog in this one. Silva-Dvorak is making his UFC debut here, 17-3 record. He's fought some decent competition, not great competition. I was actually kind of unimpressed with the competition that he's fought. If you look at the records online, they look okay. But for instance, this last guy, Arsen Tagayabov, was 16-2, and he was a really, really bad fighter. So, that guy's record is just filled with wins over cans, and Dvorak dealt with him appropriately. I've seen some good things from Dvorak. He seems to hit pretty hard for the weight class. He's got a lot of knockout wins. Has a good ground game. We've not seen much defensive grappling from him, which is the biggest concern about this fight, because Silva likely looks to offensive grapple here. He was getting outstruck by Narimani by Taha in round 1, and then came back in round 2, got a takedown and got 4 minutes of top time, and then eventually gassed out in round 3 and got choked out. But he definitely has a good top game. He can hit takedowns. Silva's dropping down in weight in this fight. His last fight was at 135 pounds. Really interesting statistic about Silva is he has gone back and forth between 35 and 25 for his past 8 fights. So he's gone up and down, up and down, up and down 8 times in a row. And honestly, I don't know what sense that makes. He just can't seem to figure out what weight class is for him, bouncing from promotion to promotion. But I like the fact that Dvorak has fought at 125 more consistently. And from what I've seen of Dvorak's offensive grappling, I think that he's a pretty competent grappler, even a pretty good grappler, I would say. And I think that despite having not seen his takedown defense, I think that he should be able to stay off his back here. He should be able to avoid getting taken down and stuck on his back for long periods of time. And on the feet, I definitely think that Dvorak should be the better striker than Silva here. So the fight really depends on how aggressively Silva pursues the takedowns. I think that if he pursues them nonstop and tries to put Dvorak on his back over and over again, he might very well win this fight. But if he tries to keep it standing, maybe mix in a takedown every so often, I think that Dvorak likely outstrikes him, stuffs the takedowns, does damage, and possibly even gets a knockout on the feet. So the pick is going to be Dvorak. Let's go with decision in this one, and not a super confident pick, but I believe that he was the right bet to make at plus money. When the fight's a pick 'em now, I don't see much value in Dvorak. I just think it's too little information on this fight to be confidently betting either side. So the pick is Dvorak by decision. Everyone who got in on Dvorak at plus money, it was probably a good bet, but right now it's going to be a pass. The next fight takes place in the women's flyweight division. We have Maria Bueno Silva, who is 6-0, taking on Maia-Burns, who is 9-3. The opening betting line for this one was Bueno Silva minus 200 to Moroz plus 160. Right now we are seeing Bueno Silva minus 150 to Moroz plus 130. So pretty shocking opening line movement in my opinion. I mean, Silva, there's very little footage of her fighting online. Only one fight in the UFC. It was a bit of a confusing fight where she got taken down by Jillian Robertson, was getting, kind of smashed on her back for a bit, and then eventually just snatched an armbar out of nowhere and got the tap on Robertson. Really weird fight. I'd say that Jillian wins that fight more times than not, and Silva got pretty lucky snatching that armbar out of nowhere. She's an orthodox fighter, decent striking, and seems to have decent grappling as well. Mostly relies on submissions off her back, but I mean, I'm impressed with Moroz. I mean, she made some very good improvements in her last fight against Mazo. She hit some takedowns on Mazo, had good clinch striking, was throwing good straight punches and outboxing Mazo in that fight, won a very dominant decision. And I think that, honestly, this line could be flipped. I think that Moroz could be the favorite here. I think that she has the better kickboxing. I think her straight punches will likely be landed on Silva. I think that the clinch will be very even, with Moroz even looking to edge it out in the clinch striking. And on the ground is where it really should be the closest. I think that Silva is definitely a submission threat, and will probably look to get this fight on the ground. But I mean, Moroz is no slouch in terms of defensive grappling. She did get taken down a lot by Carla Esparza, but she got back up to her feet. She stayed safe. She had a good guard. I could see Silva submitting Moroz here, but you cannot rely on it. I mean, Silva at 6-0 with most of her submissions coming off of her back. I mean, if she was the type of grappler to aggressively pursue takedowns, have a great top game, and slowly work the submissions out of her opponent, I would be more likely to trust her. But I think most of her submissions are just opportunistic. Like her choke on the Tuesday Night Contender Series, very opportunistic choke. And I think that Moroz is the better fighter, the better MMA fighter, well-rounded, and I think that she likely wins a decision here. So, not the most confident pick, but I honestly think that there is some value on Maia-Burns at plus 130. There's been some line movement coming in and out on this fight all week, and Moroz just jumped back up to a plus 130 underdog. So, this might be a good time to jump in on Moroz here, because I do think she wins this decision, and she's likely a good bet at plus 130. So, the pick is Moroz by decision. The next fight takes place in the bantamweight division. We have Hani Yahya, who is 26-10, taking on Enrique Barzola, who is 16-5-1. The opening betting line for this one was Barzola, the favorite, at -145 to Yahya +115. Right now we are seeing Barzola -190 to Yahya +160. So much more action coming in on Barzola as the favorite, and I would agree with the line movement here. I think that where the opening line was set was a bit too close. I think that Barzola deserves this price tag where he's at now. He dropped down to, this is his first fight dropping down to bantamweight, which is probably the only concern I really have in this fight, how he will look at bantamweight, how his cardio will hold up, and that's the only factor I think that's keeping him around -200. Besides that, I think he would be -300 or 400, because Hani Yahya, I just don't think has much left in the tank. I mean, I think he got dominated by Ricky Simón in his last fight. He was flopping to his back, looking to pull guard, and was getting taken down over and over again, pressured on the feet, and just did not look very physical in there. Was getting hurt with punches from Simón. So Barzola is actually a very similar matchup to Simón, a guy who pressures you, has decent boxing, but really thrives in the takedowns in the wrestling game. And Barzola is just that description as Simón. I actually think that Barzola might be a little bit better than Simón at this point in his career. So I've also been impressed with the improvements Barzola has been making in his boxing, and even though he dropped the first 2 rounds to Aguilar, he came back in round 3 and won that round, outboxing Aguilar, had good cardio in that last round. So he usually has great cardio. He can go the full 15 minutes grappling in really hard type of fights. Yahya, most of his recent wins have been submissions over lower level opponents. I mean, I don't think Yahya has a win over an opponent that is currently in the UFC. His past 6 or 7 submissions in the UFC are all over guys who are not in the UFC anymore. So I think that Yahya's time is past him. I think that Barzola is the much better athlete, the much better fighter at this point in his career. Likely outboxes Yahya, hits takedowns, wins the decision pretty comfortably. So I was able to bet Barzola at -178, I believe was the price I got him at. Not the greatest price, because he was hovering around -160 for a while. And then he eventually got bet down to -190 where he is now. So I think Barzola dominates here. He is a pretty confident pick for me. Only real concern is him dropping down in weight, but I'm pretty sure that he will be fit here. He'll be fit to go the full 15 minutes, and likely he wins this fight via decision. Possibly even a late finish. The next fight takes place in the welterweight division. We have Elizeu Zaleski dos Santos, who is 21-6, taking on Alexei Kunchenko, who is 20-1. The opening betting line for this one was Zaleski -175 to Kunchenko +135. Right now we are seeing Zaleski -125 to Kunchenko +105. So line margins tightening up here, and I agree with the line movement. I think that where the line is set at now is much more accurate than where it opened at, and yeah, it's a tough fight to predict. Both guys coming off of losses, pretty bad losses too, I would say. I mean, even though it was the first loss of Kunchenko's career, I mean, I think he got exposed in that fight a bit by Burns. I mean, he did come back and win that round 3 after losing the first 2 rounds. But, I mean, I think Kunchenko, my worries about him entering the UFC a little bit past his physical prime are very accurate. I think that his best days are behind him, despite him having some good boxing technique, good offensive takedowns, really good takedown defense. I just don't think he has really a high physicality. He doesn't have a good work rate. His volume is pretty low. And maybe the same could be said about Zaleski. I mean, he really got dominated last fight by Jing Liang. I would say he got exposed even worse than Kunchenko did. I mean, he got dropped in round 1. He never adapted to the fight after that. I mean, he was just swinging wild punches to try to win the fight out of nowhere, and just got thoroughly dominated, got taken down, and then eventually got knocked out in the last minute of that fight. So who knows how these guys will bounce back from those losses. It was Zaleski's first loss in a long time. I mean, he was on a really good 7-fight winning streak before losing that fight to Jing Liang. And Jing Liang did not look so good this past weekend. So, that loss is a bit of a head-scratcher. Zaleski getting thoroughly outstruck by Jing Liang, and then Neil Magny coming off a long layoff and dominating Jing Liang. So, it's a hard fight to predict. And on the feet, I think it'll be really even. I think that it'll likely be Zaleski's kicks and his crazy spinning techniques versus Kunchenko's boxing. The low volume thing will be an issue in this fight. I mean, these rounds are going to be very up in the air. They could be going either way, and I slightly favor Kunchenko to have the more consistent volume. He's going to be throwing the straight punches while Zaleski's just going to be looking for that knockout blow. And we might see Kunchenko look to hit takedowns here. So because Zaleski got taken down by Jing Liang, first of all, and even Kunchenko got taken down by Brasilia or by Burns in his last fight too. So we might see Zaleski look to hit an offensive takedown. He doesn't have a bad ground game. So on the ground in this one, I favor Kunchenko. I think that he has the better takedown defense and offensive wrestling, and I also favor Kunchenko on the feet a little bit. And with that added element of the crowd not being here to influence the judges' decisions, I like Kunchenko a little bit more in this fight. I think that with the crowd behind Zaleski reacting to all the big moments, it would have been a very big detriment to Kunchenko, and now that there's no fans in the arena, we might actually have a chance at winning this decision for Kunchenko. So I think it will be a pretty low output fight. We maybe see a takedown or two from Kunchenko to ice the rounds, but we likely see the two of them just have a low output kickboxing match in the feet with maybe like, I don't know, 100 strikes landed in the fight total. So it's going to be a hard fight to score. The rounds are going to be going every way. And I think that Kunchenko edges a close decision in this one and gets his hand raised. So hard fight to bet on as well because of that element of that low output and the decision going either way. So I do think Kunchenko wins. He's currently plus money right now, but I'm not really in a rush to bet him because I think the fight will be so close that even at plus money, it won't really stand out as a good bet. So the pick is Kunchenko by decision, and we are moving on to the next fight in the women's strawweight division, where we have Amanda Ribas, who is 8-1, taking on Ribas-Markos, who is 10-7-1. The opening betting line for this one was Ribas, the favorite, at minus 325 to Markos plus 250. Right now we are seeing Ribas minus 335 to Markos plus 275. So Ribas getting a lot of respect from the bettors and the odds makers who open this line here, and I agree with it, honestly. I do think that this is a fight where Ribas' chances of winning are 75-80%. I mean, I just think she's on a different level than Markos right now. Markos is, I'd say, towards the end of her career, hasn't really declined in her physicality too much. She's still having some pretty competitive fights. I mean, her last fight versus Ashley Yoder, very competitive physical fight. She went the full 15 minutes. She spent a lot of time on top. She got put on bottom a lot too, got reversed. I mean, it was not a very good performance from Markos, although she did win the rounds and win the fight. Got her back taken at the end of the fight as well in round 3. So I think Ribas is going to likely butcher Markos on the feet here. I mean, Ribas has good boxing. She was easily outstriking Mackenzie Dern in her last fight. She was outstriking Whitmire too. She can hit her own offensive takedowns. Double legs. Even has some judo trips as well. She's got some body lock trip takedowns. I mean, a really good array of takedowns from Ribas. And then once she gets on the ground, man, she's got good jiu-jitsu. She's got good top game, can take the people's backs, got good submissions as well. Was able to easily avoid all the takedowns of Mackenzie Dern, and thoroughly beat Dern 30-27 in that fight. So I think that Ribas really has the advantage everywhere here. I mean, maybe not in pure wrestling. Markos still might put her on her back a few times, but I think Ribas will defend, will avoid getting stuck on her back for long periods of time, get back to the feet, threaten off her back, and win these rounds here versus Markos. So where the line's at now, minus 335, I understand it. It is pretty steep. I wouldn't be betting Ribas at minus 335 for sure, but maybe throwing her parlay. Maybe I was able to get her at minus 290 to throw in a parlay, so I parlayed Barzola, and I believe Gilbert Burns. I could be wrong about that, but I'll update that towards the end of the program. So I'm pretty confident in Ribas here. Been impressed with her first 2 UFC fights. Markos, I think, has been declining a little bit lately. That loss against Gedalia was not a good look. She threw nothing in that fight, no intensity. And then even that last win against Yoder, she showed a bit of sloppiness on the ground. She showed that she's not, I think, the same grappler that she once was. So I'm picking Ribas in this one, and in terms of the betting window now, I believe it is now dog or pass. The next fight is in the men's flyweight division. We have Jussier Formiga, who is 23-6, taking on Brandon Moreno, who is 16-5-1. The opening betting line for this one was Formiga, the favorite, at -185 to Moreno +145. Right now we are seeing Formiga -150 to Moreno +130. So more action coming in on the dog Moreno in this one, although there is two-way action coming in on this fight. This is likely my most anticipated fight on the card. I really cannot wait for this one. We got the legend, the veteran, Jussier Formiga. Some of the best jiu-jitsu, top game, back takes, and also some really underrated striking in the flyweight division. The guy's been around for forever. He's a true veteran. He's got some great skill. One of the most underrated fighters in the UFC, honestly. He's taking on Brandon Moreno, who is just, he's a fireball, man. He's got so much energy and strength, cardio. This guy is charged up on so many steroids right now. I don't understand how you cannot be a fan of the guy. He came back in the UFC after a little hiatus where he got cut, won some fights, and came back. And those two fights were incredible. The performances he put against Askarov and Kai Kara-France were just, tremendous, quite frankly. The Askarov fight was scored a draw, but I honestly thought Moreno could have won all three of those rounds. He definitely won the fight in terms of just how the overall fight went, but even in the rounds, I would have scored the fight for Moreno. So it's likely going to be a battle of Formiga's top game, his back takes, versus Moreno's scrambles and his takedown defense. On the feet in this one, I think it could be close. Formiga does have very technical striking. He's got really good clinch striking for MMA. But Moreno just comes forward with pressure and power and throws punches and head kicks like nonstop. His output and his pressure is great. And, Moreno's takedown defense, his defensive grappling is not very technical. It's not, he doesn't do things the technical wrestling type of way or the technical jiu-jitsu type of way, but he just has a way of making everything work. He is so opportunistic and so strong that he can just power out of dominant positions. The back take from Dustin Ortiz is an example, and the back take of Askarov, he's just so good at exploding out at just the right time to avoid that getting his back taken or to avoid getting mounted or something like that. So it's not very technical. It might lose him this fight here because Formiga is just so technical. He's, like I was saying earlier, one of the best grapplers in UFC history, honestly. The way he neutralized Figueiredo not even a year ago was just so impressive. Took him down, mounted him, really frustrated him on the mat, and then just took off round 3 and conceded victory and won that decision. So, he's got a victory over Figueiredo, who just proved to be one of the best pound-for-pound fighters in the sport. And, Formiga did get knocked out in his last fight against Benavidez. And, that loss might not look as good now. Benavidez coming off of his loss. I definitely think that Formiga looked a step slower in that last fight versus Benavidez, and I think that Formiga overall is declining physically, while Moreno, as I said earlier, I'm not ragging on the guy. I'm not making any or I guess I am speculating, but I honestly think that Moreno is so charged up with steroids right now that it's hard to out-grapple him. It's hard to hurt him on the feet because he can just go so hard. His output and his pressure in round 3 versus Kai Kara-France was insane. And this is at an insane weight class. Flyweight demands you to be a great athlete, and Moreno stands out at that weight class of great athletes. So I'm picking Moreno to win this one here. I'm a big fan of Formiga, really respect the guy, and I think that he does have a path to win this fight. It's going to be that back take to get that body triangle. That's really, really hard to escape. He's going to be looking to take the back from maybe the standing position. He does that a lot, or he's going to be looking to time a double leg, single leg, look to take Moreno down, establish a dominant position, and out-grapple him here. But I just think that Moreno will eventually either stuff the takedowns, get off of his back, avoid the back take, escape the back take, and get back on the feet and land the harder strikes, sway the judges, and win these rounds. And I'm going to pick Moreno to win by decision. I think he's just... I'm mostly basing my opinion off the fact that he is just so much more physical than Formiga at this point. it's often not a good idea to pick physicality over technique, but sometimes it works. It worked with Figueiredo versus Benavidez, and I think it works here in Moreno defeating Formiga by decision. And at plus money, I think that right now, the odds are honestly pretty accurate. I think that pre-fight you do have to cap Formiga as the favorite, but Moreno, I was able to bet him at plus 150. I like that price for him, and I think that he will definitely fight for your money at that plus money here. So the pick is Moreno by decision once again. And that's going to move us to the main card of the evening, where the first fight takes place in the lightweight division. We got Francisco Trinaldo, who is 24-7, taking on John Makdessi, who is 17-6. The opening betting line for this one was Trinaldo the favorite at minus 200, Makdessi plus 160. Right now we are seeing Trinaldo minus 155, Makdessi plus 135. So there was some pretty steady action on Trinaldo around that minus 200 price, but the past few days, some big action has been creeping in on Makdessi. I mean, he went from minus 190 on Thursday, which is earlier today, to minus 155, which is crazy. I mean, I didn't. This must have just happened in the past few hours. Some heavy action is coming on John Makdessi, and this could have a big factor to do with the no fans being in the arena, because I think Francisco Trinaldo lost his last fight 30-27. I honestly scored all 3 rounds for Bobby Green, but the fight was in Brazil. Trinaldo, a Brazilian legend, and he won the decision comfortably. So, I mean, this is a very real phenomenon with judges and the crowd influencing the judges, and with the crowd not being in Brazil anymore, I honestly think that Makdessi has a lot better chance to win this fight, because it's likely going to go to a decision. It's likely going to be pretty low output. Both of these guys tend to be low output. Trinaldo consistently low output. He's a counter striker, and I mean, it lost him that decision versus Alex Hernandez. He won that fight for sure. He was picking his shots really nicely and outstriking Hernandez, but he was just throwing so little and being so tentative that he lost that decision. And Makdessi did not have a good performance last fight against Pinedo. He's taking a year layoff as well. But Makdessi, I'd say, does have the overall better kickboxing technique. I mean, Trinaldo has great technique. He's got really clean striking in all aspects. But I think Makdessi is just a little bit more technical. It's going to be a fun orthodox Makdessi versus Southpaw and Trinaldo matchup. And I think Makdessi, we'll see him throwing the more volume. We're going to see Trinaldo looking to throw those classic counter strikes and land the harder strikes. So we're going to see Makdessi throwing the volume strikes and Trinaldo throwing the power strikes. And I think Trinaldo definitely has the better ground game of the two. Might look to mix in takedowns here at some point, but I should mention that I do think Trinaldo is declining physically. I mean, this guy has been a physical specimen for most of his career. I mean, he was well into his 40s and still displaying incredible physical attributes in fights, but now at the age of 41, I honestly think that after those past 2 fights versus Hernandez and Green, we're finally starting to see the years add up to Trinaldo, and I think where he's losing a little bit of that physicality. So I'm still going to pick Trinaldo here, as I think that he has more ways to win this fight. I think that he can win maybe by a knockout, a counter-strike knockout. He can win the rounds just by outstriking, landing the harder shots, or by out-grappling Makdessi here. While I think Makdessi's path to victory is going to be consistently out-voluming Trinaldo for the full 15 minutes and edging 2 of those 3 rounds, which is a much more narrow path to victory. So I honestly think that Trinaldo at the current price, minus 155, not terrible. I mean, minus 190, it was definitely dog or pass. Right now, I'm not really seeing too much value on either side, and I think this will be another close decision. I'm going to pass on both sides in this one. I advise you do the same. I think even at that minus 150 price for Trinaldo, I just do not think he's reliable enough at this point in his career to be betting him at that favorite price. So the pick is Trinaldo by decision, but it's a pass on both ends for me. The next fight takes place in the light heavyweight division. We have Johnny Walker, who is 17-4, taking on Nikita Krylov, who is 26-7. The opening betting line for this one was Walker, the favorite, at minus 195 to Krylov plus 155. Right now we are seeing Walker minus 130 to Krylov plus 110. So a lot more action coming in on Krylov as the dog, and I would totally agree with that. I think that where that initial line was set was way too wide. I think that even before Walker got knocked out by Anderson, that line would have been wide. And with Walker coming off that knockout in his last loss, and him moving camps to TriStar in this one, I'm really curious to see the changes that Walker makes. I think that changing him too much would be a bad idea. I think that crazy offense in round one and his unpredictable style is honestly an attribute of his. And if Firas Zahabi tries to do too much to try to change Walker, then I think that he could be a bit tentative here and not fight to the best of his abilities. And let's talk about Krylov a little bit. He came back in the UFC, lost to Blachowicz, picked up a nice win over OSP by rear naked choke, but then in that last fight against Glover Teixeira, really bad performance from Krylov. I mean, he was getting outboxed by Teixeira. He was backpedaling and moving backwards the entire fight. He got taken down a few times and had some close grappling exchanges with Teixeira. I will say that Krylov's grappling has gotten a lot better than the last time we saw him in the UFC. I mean, the evidence is clear. I mean, he was choked out by OSP back in 2014, and then he comes back in 2019 and chokes out OSP to avenge that loss. So his ground game is getting a lot better, and I think that he is no question has the better ground game than Walker, but don't know what he will look to implement it with. I don't know if he will shoot takedowns here. I mean, he has been going for more takedowns in his recent fights, so I think Krylov has a good chance at shooting for his takedowns here. And I don't know if he'll be able to submit Walker. I don't know if he'll be able to out-grapple him. But, I mean, tapping out OSP was a very good feather in the cap of Krylov, and he might look to implement that same game plan here versus Walker. I find the striking in this fight just so hard to predict based on the fact we never know what Walker's going to do, especially the fact that he's changed camps to a much more traditional martial arts type of guy, might try to change up his style. I mean, Firas likes to get his fighters fighting behind a jab, and I mean, we might see Walker use his reach. I mean, he definitely has the capabilities to fight behind his jab, to throw a front kick, to use his range to keep his opponents at bay, and, conserve his striking style a little bit more, refine his tools instead of just being straight power shots and going all for the knockout. Really interested to see how Walker looks here, and I'm not really confident in Krylov to outstrike Walker despite him likely having the better striking technique. I mean, just the striking I saw from him and Glover, I really have no confidence in Krylov to outstrike Walker here, so I like Krylov at plus money. He's the more durable guy, no question. Only been knocked out once in his career. He's probably got the better cardio of the two, even though we have not seen him late much in the deep rounds. I mean, that fight versus Glover was one of the first times he's been in round 3 in his career, but he performed well in that round. I definitely think that Krylov is the more durable, the more athletic guy. He has the better ground game, and I'm going to side with Krylov here. Mostly because I'm just very, very weary of Walker right now. I have no idea what to expect from him coming off that loss. I think that Krylov at plus money is the right side to be on in the betting window here. Not, again, similar to Kunchenko earlier, despite him being plus money, I'm not rushing to bet Krylov here, because I think that despite him having the value pre-fight, there's going to be some moments in fight where he's going to seem like a bad bet, and might even lose this fight too. So the pick is going to be Krylov. I'm going to go with submission. I just think that the way this fight plans out is going to be so wild. These guys maybe end up on the ground via a takedown or a slip or something. Krylov gets on top and gets a submission. So not the most confident pick in Krylov here, but I'm siding with Krylov by submission. The next fight takes place in the lightweight division. We have Renato Moicano, who is 13-3-1, taking on Damir Hadzovic, who is 13-5. The opening betting line for this one is Moicano, the favorite, at minus 325 to Hadzovic plus 250. Right now, we are seeing Moicano minus 335 to Hadzovic plus 275. Not much line movement coming in on this one. We got Renato Moicano moving up to 155 pounds to make his debut against Damir Hadzovic, who's a decent lightweight. definitely has his weaknesses, and I think Moicano has the better technique everywhere. I think that really the only concern here is him moving up to 155. Maybe he's undersized. Maybe he can't deal with the physicality at 155. He's not the biggest 45er, but he's very technical. He definitely had some struggles with some fight IQ moments. He shot a takedown in round 3 versus Brian Ortega, got his neck snatched, got tapped out, was winning round 1 versus Aldo, comes out aggressive in rounds 2, gets countered and knocked out. Last fight against Korean Zombie was throwing out a lazy jab in the first minute of the fight, and Korean Zombie clocks him with the right hand and knocks him out. So, I mean, 3 major gaffes from Moicano that lost him those fights that he could have won, I think. So, maybe this move up to 55 is a bit of a question for me. I mean, I think that he made the weight comfortably at 45 consistently. So I really do not know what is motivating him to move up in weight class here. But regardless, I think that Hadzovic just has a little too many weaknesses in his takedown defense and his submission defense. The way he got taken down by Yagos, gave up his back, gave up the front headlock position multiple times. I just think that his takedown defense is too weak, and he likely gets submitted here by Moicano. I mean, Moicano is not a wrestler. He does have great jiu-jitsu, has some nice submissions on his record. Mostly a striker, though. And I think that on the feet, Moicano likely lights Hadzovic up with straight punches and calf kicks, and likely wins this fight via finish, honestly. I see Moicano getting the submission here, so the current betting window, I'd say Moicano is parlay material. I would not be betting his money line at this price. It's definitely dog or pass at this price. I don't think there's much value on Hadzovic, though, as I think he loses the fight. So the pick, once again, is Moicano by submission. The next fight takes place in the welterweight division. We have Demian Maia, who is 28-9, taking on Gilbert Burns, who is 17-3. The opening betting line for this one was Burns minus 150, Maia plus 110. Right now we are seeing Burns minus 170, Maia plus 150. So much more action coming in on the favorite Gilbert Burns in this one, and rightfully so. I think this is a very good matchup for Burns, and what a fun fight on paper. I would have loved to see it maybe a few years earlier, maybe when the fight could have been more competitive. But I mean, Burns is just moving up to 70. Maia, the veteran at 170. But, you got to mention it. Maia's 42 years old, man, and he's been really active lately. He's been picking up some nice victories. I mean, I think he's on like a 3-fight win streak, if I'm correct. Yeah, he's on a 3-fight win streak. I mean, he before that, too. I mean, he's only really lost to elite-level competition, Woodley, Covington, and Usman, 3 of the best in the weight class. I mean, even before that, he was on a 7-fight win streak over some really good opponents. So, I mean, Maia's a veteran, a legend, a Hall of Famer likely, but I mean, Gilbert Burns is the new blood in Brazil. I'm just so impressed with Burns. He's mostly fought at 55 throughout his career, decided to move up to 170 to take some short notice fights, and decided to go beat the undefeated Alexei Kunchenko, and then decided to go beat Gunnar Nelson in his last fight too. So Burns has easily transitioned up to 170. And I mean, his skill set is just getting so polished and so good. He's got heavy calf kicks that does damage with. His boxing is getting a lot better. His takedown defense is really good. I mean, his takedown defense versus Gunnar Nelson was immaculate. Stuffing double legs, stuffing shots against the fence. And I mean, I was just so impressed with his takedown defense in that fight. Really, one of the reasons why I'm confidently picking Burns here, because if a strong wrestler like Gunnar Nelson wasn't able to take Burns down for the full 15 minutes, I see Maia having a hard time taking him down. And I mean, Burns has offensive wrestling too, really good offensive wrestling, can hit some of the best wrestling for a jiu-jitsu guy that I've ever seen. Can hit shots against the cage, double legs in space, good at catching kicks and everything too. So I mean, I can't have enough good things to say about Gilbert Burns. And Maia coming off of that win over Askren in his last fight. Couple worrisome things about that fight is he got taken down by Ben Askren 4 times. Now, Askren has retired since. He's realized that he's not the same fighter he once was. He lacks a lot of physicality that he once did, but he was still able to take down Demian Maia 4 times. Now, he wasn't able to keep top position because every time he took him down, Maia was able to just sweep him or use a submission, and it really just showed the disconnect between wrestling and jiu-jitsu, because Askren would use wrestling to take Maia down, and then Maia would easily use jiu-jitsu to stand back up. So it was a really fun fight, and Maia got outstruck by Askren in round 2 of that fight too. I mean, he got busted up with some punches. So I have very little doubt that Burns will be winning the striking here. I think that Burns will be lighting Maia's leg up with calf kicks, be hurting him with punches, and Burns has talked about him wanting to engage in the grappling with Maia here, him wanting to test his skills against the legend. And I think that that would be a bad idea, obviously, but even if he chooses to do so, I think that he should still be safe and still comfortably win this fight, because he will likely take down Maia. All he has to do is just avoid a guard submission from Maia, and he should be golden to keep top position. I mean, Burns is a 3rd or 4th degree black belt. He competes against really high-level guys in jiu-jitsu on a regular basis, and I think that Burns is probably the better grappler than Maia at this point in their career. I think the physicality that Burns has, the strength that he has, outweighs Maia's technique at this point. In my experience too. I mean, there's no one who is more experienced in MMA grappling than Demian Maia. So I think this is kind of a bad matchup at this point in Maia's career. I think that he likely gets outstruck on the feet, probably gets his takedown stuffed, and without Burns willingly engaging in the grappling, maybe making a mistake, letting Maia get in an advantageous position, letting Maia sweep him. I think that Burns should comfortably win this fight and likely knock out Demian Maia in the later rounds. So the pick is Burns. I was able to bet him at -156, I believe the price I got on him was. -152, 2 units on him from a few weeks back. I definitely beat the line movement, so I'm pretty happy with that bet, and I think that Burns wins this fight comfortably. The next fight is the main event of the evening in the lightweight division. We got Kevin Lee, who is 18-5, taking on Charles Oliveira, who is 28-8. The opening betting line for this fight was Oliveira -140 to Lee +100. Right now the line has flipped. We are now seeing Lee -140 to Oliveira +120. Man, what a great fight. Really hard fight to predict. I mean, I will come out and say that I do not have an extremely confident read in this one at all. Although I just spent a lot of time watching each of these guys' fights, and I will share my thoughts on who I think has the best chance of winning the fight. And I'll just go ahead and spoil it. I think I slightly favor Kevin Lee here, but these guys are a bit similar to one another in the aspect where they both tend to start fast. They likely like to get it ahead in an early lead. Oliveira likes getting ahead with that early finish like most of the time, while Lee just likes putting a round or two in the bank, although he did get a first round knockout of his own in his last fight. Really impressive win over Gregor Gillespie, and they both also tend to slow down later in fights. Oliveira has been previously marked as a quitter, a guy who, if he starts losing rounds 1 and 2, he likely just kind of gives up and gets finished in rounds 2 or 3. But I mean, Oliveira hasn't even gone to the 3rd round since 2016. So I mean, and he's been extremely active since those times. So I mean, he's really the killer be killed type of mentality. Did get finished a few times along those lines. Got finished by that fight in the 3rd round, by the way. He did get finished by Pettis in that fight. Got finished by Lamas, and then got knocked out by Felder too. But I mean, he's been on a tear lately. 6 wins, 6 finishes. I'm sorry, 4 chokes, and 2 knockouts with punches and kicks too. So I mean, I'm really impressed with Oliveira. His striking has been getting a lot better. I think that he is the better striker in this matchup based on the fact that he just has more weapons. I mean, he's got punches, elbows, and really good kicks to go along with it, while Lee is more of primarily a boxer who mixes in the occasional kick. Now, in terms of the grappling here, Oliveira, we know that he's the more of a submission threat. He's got the better jiu-jitsu of the two. We know that Lee has the better wrestling, the better top game of the two, and it's going to be interesting to see how the two of them compete against one another. I honestly see Kevin Lee hitting takedowns. We're likely going to see Oliveira look to grab a guillotine, look to grab a triangle or something like that, but I see Lee defending. I see Lee avoiding the submission and just doing good work from top position, tiring Oliveira out, looking to pass, looking to land ground and pound. I mean, Lee's top game is no joke. He's submitted some excellent grapplers, put some great grapplers in bad positions like Tony Ferguson. And as long as Lee's cardio holds up in this fight, he doesn't have a huge cardio drop-off like he has in some of his recent fights, I think that he should win this fight and likely finish Oliveira in the later rounds, like rounds 3 or 4. Lee does have the more experience going the full 5 rounds. He's been scheduled for main events much more often. I think Oliveira's last main event was back in like 2015 or 16 or something like that, while Lee went the full 5 against Quinta back in 2018. He was scheduled for 5 rounds versus RDA, only went 4 in that fight. Was the main event of the Barboza fight, had a good 5-round performance there. So I mean, 5 of Lee's last 6 fights have been scheduled for 5 rounds, while Charles Oliveira has not gone the full 5 rounds in his career ever and has not been scheduled for the full 5 rounds since 2015. That's a huge factor. So Lee will likely have the better cardio. He will likely be better prepared for that 5-round fight, and I think that he is more likely to win those later rounds. So unless Oliveira gets out to an early lead where he starts hurting Kevin with punches, busting Kevin up on the feet, and maybe look to hit his own takedown, look to do his own work from top position. Lee is definitely a better offensive wrestler than defensive, and Oliveira has good takedown abilities. I mean, he can time a good shot, do good work from top position, and it's really going to be a fun fight. I think that it's going to be competitive wherever it goes. Slightly favor Oliveira on the feet and slightly favor Lee on the ground. And I think that Lee's wrestling, his takedowns, his top game will be a little bit too much. He likely gets takedowns, gets top position, tires Oliveira out, and gets a 3rd round ground and pound knockout. That is the official prediction. In terms of the betting window, though, I think the Oliveira money line is the one with value at this point. I mean, with Kevin Lee at -140, it's hard to trust him as a favorite. I mean, he does tend to make some bad fight IQ decisions there. He did look good in his last fight, his first fight at TriStar, popping out a good jab, outboxing Gregor Gillespie for a little bit before landing that nice head kick knockout. So I just don't think we've seen enough from Kevin to think he's some brand new fighter, some extremely polished fighter all of a sudden. So I'm siding with Lee here. I think he wins this fight, but in the betting window, I'd say it's dog or pass, and I have no bets on the main event so far. So in terms of bets I have so far, we got 1 unit on David Dvorak +116. We'll look to bet Maia-Burns at +130. A pretty sizable bet on Enrique Barzola at -170. Let's see, 1 unit Moreno +150, and then 2 units Burns -152, along with a parlay with Moicano, Ribas, and Barzola. Those 3. You parlay Barzola, Ribas, and Moicano, and you get a nice like +150, +170 parlay. So those are the bets for me. I will make all my bets official on the Bet MMA tips page. And thank you to each and every one of you who listened to the episode. I will catch you all next week before the next UFC. Peace.